Okay, so welcome to the next lesson. We're going to be looking at step 3 in the 8-step methodology. Step 3 is looking at creating an end result imagery for our client and some customized hypnotic suggestions. So let's get into it. So why is this important? Well, in this step, you are shown how to customize your session for each client. If you're going to be using scripts, there's still an element that is going to be customized to your client's model of the world and something subjective to them. It also shows you how to boost your client's emotional investment in their outcome. And so it ensures that we're going to build up their emotional leverage and that emotional investment. And also helps our client gain some clarity for themselves as to why they want to make the change in the first place, taking them a little bit away from that intellectual understanding, which is I know I need to eat healthier or I know I need to make this change, into understanding the emotional benefit that's going to give them as well. So let's get into it. So the outcomes that we're looking to achieve from step 3 is, number 1, we're going to create an evidence procedure for success. We'll talk about what that is. Number 2, we want to elicit the client's end result imagery, which is going to be used later on in the hypnotherapy session. And then number 3, we want to create at least 2 custom hypnotic suggestions that are also going to be used in the hypnotherapy session later on as well. So let's kind of break all that down. All right, so we'll start off with the evidence procedure. So with the evidence procedure, we're looking to get our client to scale their problem on a scale of 1 to 10, where they are right now and where they are hoping to be at the end of the session. That's why you got now and end. There's a little bit of scripting here for you. It says, you might say this to your client, so on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not much and 10 being a lot, how much of a concern is this problem for you right now? Again, if we've tested leverage correctly earlier, we were looking for a high score, high number. So hopefully they say something like a 9 or a 10. That's where they are right now. That number shouldn't have changed all that much from the initial number they mentioned when you were interviewing them to see if they were even a suitable candidate for you to work with or not. The next part of the question is, at the end of this session, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a concern would you like the problem to be for you then? So at the end of the session, so 45 minutes from now, where do you want that problem to be on that same scale of 1 to 10? 10 being still a big problem, or 1 being, no, not a problem, it's done. And so you're getting them to choose. So at the end of this, we have a score at the start and we have a score at the end. Now it's referred to as an evidence procedure because the evidence that we're looking for to know that the hypnotherapy has been successful is we're going to get them to score it again at the end. And hopefully it's close to that number that they're expecting to be at the end of the session. And so that gives us a procedure for finding the evidence for success. It's what we call firing off a convincer for our client. We want our client to be convinced that the transformation has taken place. We don't want any doubt to be in their mind, don't want any uncertainty, we want them to be convinced. And so this sets us up to have a convincer at the end of the session. Now, there's a few common mistakes that I've seen people make when trying to get the evidence procedure, and I want to go through them so you know what to avoid. Now, one of the mistakes is that they allow the client to say a lot or some other generalization rather than choosing a number. So when you ask someone, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a problem is this? Oh, it's a big problem. Now, sometimes people go, oh, okay, great. They accept that. They don't get them to go for a number. Well, no, you don't say no, of course. You might say, I know it's a lot. Great. What number would you give it? And get them to always go back to a number. Get them to go back to a number because therefore we can now make it measurable. So don't let them get away with the generalization. The next mistake I see people make is they allow the client to say 2 numbers rather than choosing 1. So where would you like to be at the end of the session? Oh, maybe a 1 or a 2. Okay, great. Which number would you choose? 1 or a 2? 1. Awesome. No, I don't mind what they choose. And so please just know that it doesn't matter what they choose. You just want to ratify it. Whatever they choose is perfect for them. They can say a 5. Awesome. Great. And then the final mistake I see a lot of people make is they don't ensure that the rating is based on how the client will feel about the problem at the end of the session rather than how the external problem may shift or change or may not shift or change. So to give you an example, with weight loss, if someone comes for a weight loss session, then at the end, at 45 minutes, their weight is likely not going to shift much. But it's about their psychological resourcefulness. It's about whether they feel they can overcome this now. So there are a few sort of treatment styles where you might just need to massage the question a little bit to make sure the client clearly understands what you're asking. So if it was a weight loss client, What I might say is, look, in 45 minutes, the weight's not going to miraculously drop off you. Well, not for most people anyway. So just at the end of this session, knowing how you're likely going to feel differently about it on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to be concerned about the problem? 10 being still a big concern, or 1 being, no, it's not a concern. I know it's going to happen. So you just got to frame it up in a different way to give it some correct context so your client understands what they're answering. All right, so that's, at that point, we have the evidence procedure. You score on where they are now and score on where they'd like to be at the end of the session. Then we move into the end result imagery. And so the end result imagery is an emotionally connected future memory. We're creating a future memory that they are going to be emotionally connected to, that is part of their leverage, that is kind of the emotional reason as to why they want to make this transformation in the first place. And so there are 4 keys to a successful end result imagery. I've just given an acronym there, EIR. So number 1, you want to use the client's specific language and keywords. Don't translate it into your language. Keep it in their keywords, their language, because that means the most to them then. Number 2, make sure it's positive. You want to make sure it's positive. You don't want to let them give you a negative response and you move forward with that, because it causes all sorts of problems. It's like, imagine when someone's knitting, if they miss a stitch and they keep going, well then once they've finished the cardigan, there's a hole in it. And so same sort of thing is, we need to kind of repair these things. You want to make sure that these fit the model before we move any further. So if they say something that's negative, we need to convert it into a positive. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. I want to make sure it's a behavior, one behavior, not multiple behaviors. So we want to find out it's a behavior, an observable behavior, a behavioral change. That's why people want transformation. They want to change their behavior in some way. No client will ever go, I want to get this treatment, I want to get this transformation, but I just want life to go exactly how it is. That's not true. It's not true. It just wouldn't work like that. There is some shift in their behavior that they're looking for. Even if it's just to feel better, there's some, by feeling better is going to shift their behavior, right? So a feeling leads to a behavior, which you heard from the Matrix of Reality. And then number 4, make sure it's specific to one experience. So again, getting really clear to one experience. So we don't let our clients get away with saying things like, I'll be exercising every day. Well, every day is not one experience. That's multiple experiences. So you always want to narrow them down into one experience. Great. What day do you want to be exercising? What's the first day? What's the 5th day? So get into Monday. Great. So now we get clear on Monday. Yes, you can exercise every day, but let's just get clear on one specific experience for now. Now, these are kind of the principles of it. We're going to get into the detail in the next slide. So let's get into it. So this is how you create the end result imagery in 5 steps. Number 1, or part 1, we want to future pace our client. So we're pacing them into the future. And we'll say, how will your life improve when you've overcome this problem? And they're going to say something. Now, there's 1 or 2 responses you're going to get. You're either going to get a response that's positive or a response that's negative. And what I mean by that is you might say, how will your life improve when you overcome this problem? They might say, well, I'll be able to go and do the things I've always wanted to do. Now, is that positive? It is, because they're focusing on all the things that they want to do. That's positive. Now, a negative response would be, how will this improve your life when you overcome this problem? They might say, well, at least I'll stop doing those things, those bad habits. Now, is that positive or negative? Well, it's negative, because what are they focusing on? The bad habits. They're focusing on the thing that they don't want. And so that's a really easy way to look at, is it positive or is it negative? Are they focusing on what they want or what they don't want? Then we're going to look at number 2, part 2. We want to make sure it's positive. So if the client's previous response to the future pace was positive, well, you just keep moving on. If it's not positive, if it is negative, such as I won't feel this or I won't do that, then what you would ask them, well, how will you feel instead? Or what would you be doing instead? And so you're going to ask them, what would you be doing? So as you'll see here, we're not giving a response to our client. You don't want to give a response to your client, because if you give them a response, whose model of the world is that based on? Whose matrix of reality is that based on? It's based on yours. It's not your client's. You're going to get so much more powerful transformations if you elicit the responses from your client. As great coaches know that we don't have to have the answers, because the client already has the answers within them. Great hypnotherapists, they don't give their client answers. They elicit from their client's unconscious mind. And so make sure when you're doing this that you're writing down their responses in their exact language. Don't translate it. Write down their language exactly. All right, so at this point, we've now converted it into a positive. The next step is we want to create it into a behavior. So sometimes your client will actually give you a behavior. You'll say, how will your life improve when you've overcome this problem? They'll say, well, I'll be jogging more. Now, is jogging a behavior? It is, right? You can see it. Now, is it positive? Of course it is. Let's focus on what they want. So sometimes your client will give you a response that you're looking for and you're like, awesome, less work to do. But often they won't. Often they'll say, well, I won't be doing those bad habits. Okay, so that's negative. So if you're not doing those bad habits, what would you be doing instead? I'll be doing good habits. Great. So is good habits a behavior? Well, you could argue it is, but it's not a very clear behavior. So as it says there, A is if a client's previous response is clearly an observable behavior, then you can move on to part 4. If it's not, which this isn't, it's a generalized behavior, then if the client's response is not a clear behavior, such as I'll be happier or I'll be doing good habits, then ask, when you are doing good habits or when you are happier, what would you be doing differently? And you might throw in the word, what would you be doing specifically? And that really narrows them down into choosing a behavior. And again, write this down. So we've now got them from originally they came in or they're speaking to you and they just want to lose weight or they want to quit smoking or want to stop drinking or want to sleep better or they want to overcome depression or PTSD or whatever it is that they want to overcome. And now we're getting into a future memory as to why that is. What are they going to be able to achieve when they do this? And so we're painting a picture. We're painting a focus in their mind. We're creating mental rehearsal is really what's going on here. And so psychologically, anything that we mentally rehearse, we are more likely to make happen in our lives. And that's what we're doing. We're helping our client. We're setting up our client for success through this. Let's keep going. So they've now given us a specific behavior. Great. So we're now into the specifics of it. And now A says, always use the previous responses given to frame up the question you are asking the client. So if my client said that they will be jogging, then that's right. Let's say it's smoking. So I want to be a non-smoker and I might say I won't be doing bad habits. Great. So if you're not doing bad habits, what would you be doing? I'll be doing good habits. Okay. So when you're doing good habits, what would you be doing specifically? I'll be jogging. Great. So we've got jogging. So now I frame it up and I say, okay, so we then move to B. So ask the client when they see themselves doing the change, the positive, and the behavior. So, and then it says tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So what I would say is, okay, so you're now a non-smoker. You're jogging. You're doing good habits. So the change is non-smoker. The positive is the good habits. The behaviors are jogging. So I'm like, okay, you're now a non-smoker. You're doing more good habits. There you are jogging. When would you be jogging? Tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. When would you be jogging? It's okay as to what they choose. They can choose anything. It's up to them. It's their model of the world. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be next week. It doesn't have to be next year. It's up to them as to what they choose. It is their model of the world. It is their future reality that they get to choose to create here. No judgment. Whatever they choose is just perfect for them. They're going to say something. Great. Awesome. So they choose something. Let's say it's tomorrow. Great. We now know it's tomorrow. Then we go to C. Ask the client where they will be doing it. So great. Okay. So you're now a non-smoker. And I layer in all the responses to frame up the question. So you're now a non-smoker. You're doing good habits. You're jogging tomorrow. Where would you be jogging tomorrow doing these good habits? At the park. Great. So we now get at the park. Now that's a where. And then we move to D. Ask the client who they'll be doing it with, alone or with someone else. And so you got change behavior, positive behavior, when and where. So layer that in. Okay, so you're now a non-smoker. You are doing better, good habits. You are jogging around at the park tomorrow. Who would you be jogging around the park tomorrow with? Yourself or someone else? And they can choose. They can be alone. They can be with someone else. They might say with Sally. Great, awesome. So now we've got the specifics. We've got one more question to ask, and this is kind of like the wow factor to it. Is ask the client how it will make them feel to be doing all of this. And you want to ask this in an excited way, because if you don't ask it in an excited way, you get a really monotone response. So this is how you would ask it. You'd say, okay, so it's now tomorrow. It doesn't matter what order you put the information in, just as long as it's all there. So I'm going to frame up the question again. Okay, so it's now tomorrow. You are jogging at the park with Sally. You're a non-smoker. You're doing these good habits. How would that make you feel? So did you pick up on the change in my tonality then? Like I get more excited. I want to get excited for my client, because if I play full out, then my client's going to play full out. If I'm really bored with it, or I'm really sort of monotone with it, then my client's not going to give me a good response. Like if I do it like this, okay, so it's tomorrow and you're jogging around the park with Sally and you're a non-smoker and you're doing good habits. How would that make you feel? Good. That's the sort of response you're going to get, right? So you want to play full out so your client plays full out with you. And again, write down all their responses in their exact language. Don't translate it. Keep it exactly as it needs to be in your client's language. And then at the end of that, we then have the end result imagery. So part 5 is all the responses that you've got has now created this imagined picture or movie in our client's mind of this future moment, which is the end result imagery. It's an imagery of one of the end results of this transformation. So it's the change, the positive, the behavior, the when, the where, the who, and how does it make you feel? And so as it says, end result imagery is future memories that is emotionally important to the client for what will be possible after making this transformation. The benefit of it is that it boosts leverage higher and it provides a mental rehearsal, as we already talked about. Now, one thing to be aware of is it actually doesn't matter if it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that the transformation doesn't work. What it really does, it just motivates psychologically our client for the next 12 hours or 24 hours. And so it doesn't actually matter. Maybe the park shut down. Maybe, people are doing social distancing right now and Sally's not available. Whatever's going on, it doesn't actually matter if it doesn't happen, because it's the potential for that to happen. And there's so many other end results that our client has unconsciously they're just not telling us about yet. So it doesn't matter, but we're just helping them find one for now. Now, I want to give you an example of this. And so as you can see here on one column, you've got the parts that we go through. You've got what the practitioner says, and you've got the responses from your client. So if the practitioner was to ask, how will your life improve when you've overcome this problem? The client might say, well, I won't feel so tired all the time. So won't and tired tells us that it must be negative. So we need to convert into the positive. So if you aren't feeling tired, then what would you be feeling instead? The client would go, well, I'll be feeling more energetic. Great, so it's now positive, energy. Then we move to behavior. So when you're feeling more energetic, what would you be doing differently? I'll be exercising more. Great, so exercise is now behavior. Then we move to specifics. So you are now, and we're going to layer in the responses. So you're now more energetic. You're doing more exercises. When would this be happening? Tomorrow, next week, next month, next year? When would this be happening? Next Monday. Great. Now, can we get clearer than next Monday when it comes to time? We can. Just say, great. So what time next Monday would you be exercising more energetically? 7:30 a.m. Great. So we've got next Monday, 7:30 a.m. Is this making sense? Just we've narrowed it down to this specific moment in the future timeline. And then we keep going. So specifics of where. So where would you be doing more exercise, feeling energetic next Monday at 7:30 a.m.? So you see how we layer in all the responses. At the park. Great, at the park. So who would you be doing more exercises at the park, feeling energetic next Monday at 7 a.m.? Would you be doing it alone, or would you be with someone else? Or with Sally? Great, so we've got Sally. So it's next Monday. So this is where I kind of frame it up as it's really happening. So it's next Monday at 7:30 a.m. You're at the park with Sally, feeling energetic and doing more exercise. How would that make you feel? Amazing. Great, so write down amazing. So you can see the end result imagery there is that when I talk about taking down their language exactly, it's not their full long sentences, it's just the key words. So all I would need to write down would be energetic, more exercise, next Monday at 7:30 a.m. at the park with Sally, amazing. That's all I need to know. So you don't need to keep meticulous, wording everything they say word for word. It's a word, verbatim. You don't need to capture their details verbatim, but you just need to capture their key words and keep it as their key words. Sometimes people say 7 o'clock. Well, I write 7 o'clock. I don't normally say 7 o'clock. I would normally say 7 a.m. But I would write 7 o'clock. Even translating it from o'clock to a.m. is not using my client's model of the world. It's pushing my client into my model of the world. So I go to that extreme, and I encourage you to do the same, because those 1%ers that we do, and if we do a few of them, it boosts our performance and the success of what we do by 10%, by 20%. And so just make sure you're trying to do as much as you can to use your client's language. That's just a quick example for you. Now, there's a few mistakes that people make around this. So let's have a look at them so you know what to avoid. One of the mistakes that people make is they allow the client to continue with a negative focus. The practitioner forgets that it needs to be positive, and it gets all sorts of craziness coming out of the end result imagery because it's actually negative. And they wonder why they get into this negative. Okay, so what would you be doing when you're not coughing? I guess I won't be causing so much issues in my lungs. Okay, so when you're causing so much issues, like, it just, they wonder why, hang on, how come I'm not getting my client to where they need to be? It's because they skipped a step earlier. You didn't quite capitalize on that first step. The next one is that the client gives more than one answer, but the practitioner isn't able to help them choose only one. And what I mean by that is, you might say, so how will your life improve? Well, I might say, well, I'll be jogging more, I'll be more productive, and I'll be having a better time with my partner. So jogging, more productivity, partner. 3 things. Some people go, okay, great. So when would you be doing those 3 things? Well, that's often, for many people, is not just one moment. That's many moments. And they wonder why, when they work with their client, they're unable to get their client to narrow down to one particular moment, because they haven't narrowed it down from all these 3 behaviors. So if my client gives me 3 behaviors, or 4 or 5 or 2, it doesn't matter. I'll say, okay, so out of all those things you just mentioned, which is the most important to you? If you had to choose one, which is the most important? And get them to always choose one. We're aiming for specificity here. We're aiming for the detail, a specific moment in their future timeline. That's what we're looking for. Not many moments, one specific moment. That's what we're going for here. And another mistake that people make is the practitioner asks a question that isn't part of the end result imagery, or they're trying to do some minor therapy at this stage. What I've seen some people do is come from like a counseling background, or maybe even a psychology background, and they start asking some, different questions at this point, and the whole interview goes off on a different tangent. Oh, so tell me, why are you doing that? Oh, and then it's like you've just opened up a can of worms to that person going on a rant about their backstory. That is not using your time effectively, and it's not time for that, and it's a different form of therapy. And so, please don't avoid trying to ask questions just out of curiosity, or trying to bring in too much other different techniques at this point, because you're mixing it up. You might confuse your client. You're actually losing the emotional association of the end result imagery that you're trying to build if you're trying to do too much in this step. So get this step done correctly, and it's going to have the power behind it. And then you can use some other tools around the edges if you wanted to. But try to stick to the questions as it's designed, and it's super easy. I've seen this. Having trained 9,000 people, I've seen so many people complicate it because they don't follow the basic questions. They throw in some new question, or they forget. They just let their own interest guide them, and they ask a question that's not relevant, and then they end up having a 15, 20-minute conversation, and they wonder why they've now run out of time. And so it's about being strategic. It's about you being in control of it. It's, just like a surgeon. If a surgeon's going to perform surgery on someone, they don't have time to have a half an hour chat with the patient if, surgery is scheduled in 10 minutes. They can have a 10-minute chat, but they can't have a 30-minute chat. And so it's the same sort of thing. As a professional hypnotherapist, you have to be in control of your time. You have to be in control of the session. You have to be in control of your own interests and doing what you can for the betterment of your client to get them the best result as possible. And so that's some of the mistakes that people make with the end result imagery. All right, so we've just completed the end result imagery. So at this point, we now have the evidence procedure. We now have the end result imagery. We're now moving into creating the 2 hypnotic suggestions. And so there's a framework for the basic suggestions here. And that framework is a context, or time, or a context. So the suggestion has a frame of reference. We want to mention it in present tense because we want our client to realize they can have it immediately, because it's all within them already. They can have it immediately. Number three, we want to we want to make sure that it is positive, because what we focus on is what we create. And so we want to make sure that our client is focusing on the positive things, because that is what's going to manifest into their reality. Number four is solution. So this is where you do bring maybe a little bit of your own judgment, your own model of the world into it, because you're going to suggest something as a suggestion that can help solve the problem. So for example, if it's weight, what would be a generic solution to that? Well, it's probably to eat healthier portions. It's probably to eat healthier meals. It's to make healthier choices. It's to find it easy to exercise. It's to drink more water. So there's some really basic things. You don't have to be a full-on expert in certain areas to just come up with some common sense hypnotic suggestions. And then number five, make sure it's concise. Don't make it too long and convoluted. Make sure it's direct and using deliberate language so it has some power behind it. And then number six, you want to throw in some power words. And some power words really amplify the impact of the hypnotic suggestions. And we'll show you what I mean. So by power words, what I'm really meaning is things like more, faster, easier, or stronger. So rather than just say every day you now have confidence, you can say every day you now have more confidence. And so rather than saying every day I now study, you can say every day I now find it easier to study. Rather than saying every morning my body now heals, you can say every morning my body now heals faster. And so we can put these sort of power words into it that amplify the impact of it. But some examples that fit this framework is things like every day you now feel more confident. So every day being the time and context, now being present tense, confident being the positive solution, and more being the power word, and it's pretty concise. Then you have every morning you now wake up feeling full of energy, and every night you now find it easy to go to sleep. So a good model is just every day you now, and then fill in the blanks with something that's positive as a solution. Keep it concise and throw some power words into it. Now, the way you develop the suggestion with your client, because you develop this with your client there, so you put yourself under a higher demand to come up with them fairly quickly. So you use the framework. You use the framework such as every day you now, and then you fill in the blanks. You just trust your unconscious. You've got to get into that flow state. You've just got to trust your unconscious that you're going to say the right thing. And if you say something else and you feel like it's not the right thing, you can go, you know what, I've got a better one for you. You repair it. You don't say, oh, I made a mistake. Again, because if you make a mistake, what do? You keep going. You just repair it. You go, oh, if you say something that comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh, that's not very good. You go, you know what, I actually got a better idea than that. And you give them a better idea. So you want to design it. You then once you've designed once you have an idea as to what the suggestion is going to be, you then want to socialize it. So you ask your client if they're happy with the suggestion. So you might say, so would you be happy for me to give you a suggestion under hypnosis that, and then you give them the suggestion. And then at this point, what we're doing is we're looking for a physiological shift. We want to watch their immediate facial expressions for the impact. Don't accept a polite client's approval if you don't feel like they feel that there's power behind those words. I'm always looking for my client to have some sort of emotional response, some sort of physiological response to the suggestion. Otherwise, I'm going to keep looking for a suggestion until I get that. Typically, I don't have to go more than probably 6 or 7 suggestions before I find the 2 really good ones. But looking for a congruent agreement. Look for the client's congruent and confident agreement to know those words likely do have some power behind them. So I don't accept someone saying, yeah, okay. I'm looking for them to go, that sounds good. But that's more congruent. Not like, oh, that'll do. Not that'll do. I won't accept that'll do. I'm looking for a congruent response. Now, what you can do is a plan B, if you can't think of some, or you've exhausted your list and you're like, I don't know. Sometimes if I give them 3 and they're like, nah, not really. Yeah, that's okay. And if I get to my 3rd one and they're like, yeah, I guess so. Like, I haven't found any yet that are working. What I will do is I'll throw it to my client. I go, great. Well, look, are there any suggestions? And we're at number 5 now. Are there any suggestions that you'd like me to give you? Now, I'm also aware at this point that my client often doesn't know that has to be negative. So they might say, oh, yeah, can you say to me that every day can you say something about me not eating sugar? I go, great, I can help you with that. But I'll stop here. But you and I now know that we can't say every day you won't eat sugar, because what are they focusing on? Sugar. They're focusing on the negative. It's not going to work. We can't focus on the negative, because then what we're focused on is what we're going to manifest. They're going to manifest more sugar in their life. So what we would do is say, look, I can help you with that, but can I ask you, if you're not eating sugar, what would you be eating instead? And they're going to say something. I say, oh, healthy foods. Great. So is sugar a healthy food? No, it's not. Awesome. So by omission, we are going to eliminate sugar. So what I can do is say to you, every day you find it easier to eat healthier foods. Are you happy with that? Yeah, let's do that. Great. So we go with it. So you can always ask your client. I think it's a really good thing to try and do, get some engagement from your client. So give them one suggestion that you've created and then elicit one from them, but just know they may give it to you negative and you might need to modify it to get into the right framework. Now, some common mistakes that I see people make around this is that they allow the client to agree to a suggestion because the client's just being polite. Don't accept that. Often what happens is a practitioner won't realize that they're giving a negative suggestion. It feels like it's positive, but it's actually negative, such as like debt-free or pain-free or sugar-free. All of those things, they seem positive, but what are we focusing on? Debt. What's the topic? It's debt. What's the topic? It's pain. What's the topic? It's sugar. They're all focused on things we don't actually want. So if ever your client gives you a response like that, you might just say, okay, so what's a different way of describing it? If you're pain-free, how else would you describe your body? And you again, like I got responses ready to go. Like I know what the answers to those questions are, but it's not my answers that's important. It's my client's answers. So please don't put words in your client's mouth. Let them go through that little bit of that effort to come up with their answers themselves. And then also, I've seen some people create suggestions that are too long. They think it's so clever by creating this big, long, convoluted suggestion, but it actually loses its potency then because the client can't remember what the start of it was. So keep them really short and punchy, like a headline almost. I've put this slide in here twice. Let's just jump through that. It's exactly the same there. So now what's happened is we have got these three outcomes. The three outcomes from step 3 is you have the evidence procedure of where they are now, where they want to be at the end. We have the end result imagery, which is their future memory that has some emotional impact. And then we have 2 custom hypnotic suggestions. So we've just set ourselves up for the future steps. As it says there, note, these elements become useful in later steps. If we don't get these correct, it's going to impact some of the later steps that we're going to be taking our client through. So it's so important to get this correct. It is easy, but it is also probably one of the most detailed steps in the 8-step methodology. So, just take your time to go through it and just follow it through methodically and you'll get the result if you just stay true to the process. So that's it for this lesson, but I want you to comment below and just summarize what you've just learned through this lesson. Try and summarize it fairly quickly. I don't expect you to do long paragraphs, but just try and just represent the information really quickly whilst it's still fresh in your mind, and just comment below and I'll see you on the next exercise.